Thank you. Okay, can I invite the filmmakers up to the stage, say a few words? Hello. Yeah, you can sit next to me. You can have a microphone. Okay. Looks like we have a missing seat here. So Matt, Abyss, no, didn't quite make it. Never mind. Taking a photo. Okay, so let's. I'll introduce the filmmakers. We've got Simon Ball, who made "Do I See What You See?" Perfect. Jennifer Zheng, Conan O'Brien discusses the White Stripes.
It's a long one.
Yeah, the long one. The White Stripes song. Alex Widdowson, Music and Clowns. Chris Shepherd, Brexicuted, and Marcus Armitage, that Yorkshire sound. I think it sort of makes sense to just start by like going along, talking a bit about. Talk about a bit about the process of making a film, how it came about. Briefly, tell us, about the film.
Yeah, it's the first documentary animation I've ever made. I met a scientist who's like the leading researcher in this type of dementia at UCL. I met him as part of like a speed networking event where filmmakers get to meet academics in a sort of speed dating context. And we, as part of that project, we got to pitch for some funding. We had to sort of develop an idea and then pitch it. And we didn't get that funding, but we really liked the idea. So, I mean, he's an academic and a medical researcher, so he was able to sort of find funding. It wasn't sort of extravagantly funded, but he was able to find money to sort of keep the process going. And yeah, I knew nothing about dementia at all. I didn't even know the difference between. I didn't really know that dementia was like an umbrella term that included Alzheimer's and many other different forms as well. I'm still finding out new types of dementia as well. So I'm starting from the ground up, and yeah, it wasn't something that I would normally have sort of. I wasn't seeking to make a medical film. I met him in this context, and when he started describing the symptoms to me, it felt like he was describing animations, basically the things that people experience and see. Just made me feel like that's an animation. And I think for a long time I questioned whether I was the right filmmaker to make that kind of film. But he was really encouraging, and the sort of seed of the idea I was really confident in, and gradually, eventually, we sort of pieced it together, and yeah, from there it kind of snowballed into a film.
Okay. Jennifer, so you're part of the Moth collective.
Yeah, I think we're just Moth now. Rebranded Moth Studio.
Yeah.
New name.
New
Marco's in the audience.
Yeah,
Hi,
there's another
Marco.
Moth over there. Okay, tell us about the Conan O'Brien
We
film.
made it, XL Records just came to us with the recording already. So it was pretty short, actually. It was only like a 4-week production, and then we just bashed it out. It's fun.
Okay.
It's a good one.
Yeah. So you're part of a collective. So what part did you play in that, the making of that film?
So I directed and designed this one, and then I'm not part of the collective because it's not a collective anymore. It's a studio now.
Okay. But you were a collective then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, no. I think still no.
Still
no?
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, but there's 7 of us now, full-time people.
Right. So you directed, and like there's a few other animators.
Yeah. And everyone pitched in and
Right.
got it out. It was really fast.
So when you get a film to make, who decides who does what? How does it work?
I think someone just like naturally gravitates towards the.
Do you fight over it? Do you have
No.
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 It's all very amicable, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Everyone kind of pitches in, and it's really nice.
Cool. Okay. All right. Alex, so you
Hello.
made Music and Clowns. Tell us about that.
Yes, this is my graduate project from the Royal College of Art. and I've been sort of specialising in animated documentary for quite a long time. And we're sort of spitballing ideas towards the end of the first year. And I just sort of mentioned my brother and how, you know, we don't really know what he's thinking about, but you can sort of feel what's going on with him, and sort of, you know, how we all disagree about our interpretations of what might be going on in his head. And everyone in the room just sort of switched on and was like suddenly interested in what I was saying. And I think, okay, I've got a project here. This is good. So yeah, just, yeah.
Was it a difficult film to make?
No, it was really easy, a lot easier than all the other films I've ever made. I had 30 years access with my documentary subject. It was a breeze in comparison to, you know, scraping together projects about like really complicated, over-the-top subject matter. It's just family was like dream access. I don't think you can ever get anything like it, actually.
And obviously he's seen the film. Does he?
Yeah,
how does he think about it?
First viewing, it was all a bit much, like it's quite fast editing, and he'd like recognize a clown, he'd be like, yeah, and then it had moved on already to something else. And but I think the second time, when it was shown in the degree show, there was a sort of installation that was a recreation of his bedroom, and it's quite funny. He turned up and he was sort of a bit of a celebrity, and he looked quite at home as well. So no, he was just had a great day with all like my friends sort of crowding around him, sort of trying to get his attention. So it was good, yeah.
Okay. Chris, tell us about Brexicuted.
Yeah, well, I was on the day after the referendum. A producer from France phoned me up, and basically I've done a few films for French TV, and he said, "Oh, with the Brexit, I don't think we'll be able to make another film again after that. Oh, it's all going to be different." And then I was already feeling a bit bad about the Brexit because I thought I didn't really like it. I was a Remainer. And then I was watching the TV and I saw this woman going on about, you know, she wants it to be back the way it was and when England was great and all this. And all I could think about was blowing her up. And so that was sort of the start of it then. So I started to like listen to lots of interviews and then sort of created a bit of a mockumentary, I suppose. It's about the sort of chaos of the Brexit.
So did you interview all those people?
Well, no, I looked at a lot of interviews, and then I got like it's sort of. I could say I did. I should say I did.
You
I?
should, yeah.
Anyway, but you get an idea. What I had to. I mean, some of the people as well. Some of the clips that I looked at had people like the EDL and stuff like that, and I didn't want to use their voices because. Obviously didn't want to get my house firebombed. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I came up with this version, but
so
yeah.
they don't know they're in the film. These people.
Well, no, I mean, well, it's a mixture of people, but yeah, it's all right. Yeah.
You're not going to get your house firebombed. Hopefully not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Marcus, tell us about that Yorkshire sound.
Cool. So yeah, I mean that film was made for. It was made for BBC 4 originally. It was part of a programme called Listen to Britain, and it was kind of looking at the film Listen to Britain by Humphrey Jennings and reimagining it for now, I guess, through, there was, I think it was 10 different films made. And I'd always kind of imagined this film in my head before then, because I'd often just sat on the train and I had music on, and watching out of the window, you'd see poles go by, and then they had the lines looping by that, and sometimes it'd go in time with the music, and I always quite liked that idea. And then this came along, and I wanted to make something that was rhythmical and just showcased Yorkshire in its different good and bad ways, and that's how that all came together. And it was just trying to show a lot of time I worked with observation, and it was just trying to show Yorkshire in the way that I felt about it. And but it was, yeah, I mean, it's very quick, and every time I watch it, it's even quicker. And I'm like, whoa, I didn't even read what any of that said. So I can imagine that nobody else can see it either. And especially my grandma and granddad, they can't. It just disappears in a couple of seconds. So, yeah, it was just a quick kind of montage of different things and sounds. I went out and recorded lots of different sounds from around Yorkshire. I spent a week just kind of going about with a microphone and then edited it all together into some form of rhythm that just show a day, basically. And it was a bit of a crazy thing trying to fit Yorkshire into 2 minutes. And yeah, maybe it worked.
I mean,
We'll
it
see.
almost seems like an improvised film.
Yeah. Well,
Was it scripted, or did you sort of like?
Well, so the kind of the program was, mine was the only animation in that program, and so everything was geared towards live action. So all the editing happened at the end of the process, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
whereas my editing happens in the first couple of weeks, and in that time, so basically the film is a week's worth of me thinking about what I'm going to do, and then the rest of the time doing whatever I thought about in that week, which by the end you're like, I wish I'd have never done some of these things, because you suddenly see all the mistakes coming and everything that you thought someone might be able to see in like 1 second, you realise that you can't quite see it in that amount of time. But you know, it was quite an instinctive filmmaking process, I think, but fun. Which was good.
Okay, just I'm interested in just finding out, just like generally. You can all just leap in here, but why you chosen to work in like this genre, animated documentary? I mean, I know, like Chris, I know you make other films, not necessarily animated documentaries, but you have done others as well that are in that genre. But do you want to say what you think animation can add to documentary that, say, live action can't? I mean,
Yeah, I've worked on a few different. One thing I worked on years ago was with Paul Vester on Abductees, and I was the production manager on that. And
we're screening that as part of Jonathan Hodgson.
yeah.
Tomorrow night.
And I think what it does is it gives you a sense to create something that doesn't exist. I mean, I remember at the time when in the 90s when we did Abductees, the people said that a documentary that was not live action wouldn't be believable at that time. Do you know what I mean? In a sense, because nobody did animation then. But I think now you look at animation, it's really, you know, because you can show people's aspirations, their imagination. You can show things that happened, things that never happened. You know, you can show, recreate the Titanic sinking or whatever you want. You can do things that you could never see. And I think that's really exciting with documentary, you know. I think that's really, really great. I mean, I think all the films, I just want to say myself, just watching it as a member of the audience, I'm just blown away by all the films. I thought they were amazing. I just thought they were really moving. And do you want to have a go?
Anyone else just leap in, so add something.
I mean, I think that is the sort of definitive answers that you can do what the camera can't do.
Yeah.
But I think particularly Simon, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Simon's film is a really good example of like demonstrating what something that's very real to an individual and capturing subjectivity that, you know, otherwise couldn't be communicated effectively. Language is so limited, and there's a sort of visual sort of world that we can create, which we might not get exactly right, but at least sort of walk along that path towards the direction of what it might be like for that person.
Yeah, I think just after I left university many years ago, I worked as like an intern for a documentary TV company, and I was part of a team of just like generating ideas, or that the company or the producers would come up with an idea and send us off to like research stuff, which tended to be spending the whole day reading Wikipedia. But I remember coming up with so many ideas that were like shot down because they didn't have like a visual aspect to them, and television kind of needs like, what can you actually film that has like some kind of USP to it. And I can imagine maybe your film is kind of similar, but like visually to film people with dementia, it's sort of like old people's home, and it's not to do a disservice to them, but it doesn't have any kind of, you know, it's quite mundane environment, it's everyday environments, and it doesn't have, whereas like animation allows you to bring it to life. And in your film in particular, you had very everyday locations like the street, but just by drawing that gives it some kind of more excitement. It brings it to life in a different way that's more interesting than just sticking a camera in that location, if you see what I mean.
It's quite a strange thing to like animate the microphones into frame as well. Like all of that stuff is very carefully thought through, and like it was about making you realize this is a documentary, and the sort of process of the sort of manipulations you might have on your subject as you sort of trying to make a film about them, rather than sort of, I feel like sometimes observational or stuff where you don't really see the filmmaker in the process, masks, you know, the sort of ethics of how you're manipulating the audience and the subject, and so that's why I sort of included all that sort of mundanity, and as a sort of baseline to steer off into the fantastical.
Have the people in your film seen the finished one?
I interviewed 6 people, or 6 couples, so there was like 6 people who had been diagnosed with posterior cortical atrophy, and 5 of those 6, I interviewed them with their husband or wife, who was also their carer. So the husbands or wives have all seen it. I think only like 3 of them would be able to watch it and take something away from it. The other 3, their dementia had progressed too much. They wouldn't really be able to understand it. Yeah, does that? Yeah.
What did they think?
I mean, the feedback I got was, overwhelmingly positive. I think it's such a rare form of dementia. Like only 1% of people who are diagnosed with any kind of dementia have that kind of dementia, as far as research suggests. So I think generally, like the community around it, scientists and carers who work with it, were just sort of pleased that anybody was doing anything to sort of bring it to the public. There was one amazing story. The first guy I interviewed, he had symptoms of like normal Alzheimer's. He wasn't really aware that he had this sort of spatial condition specifically. And I would ask him, like, what's it like to use a computer? And he would say, yeah, absolutely fine. And then his wife would butt in and say he hasn't actually used a computer for 3 months. But after I made the film, sadly, he passed away a few months ago, actually from lung cancer. But whilst he was in hospital for that, the nurses thought that he was rejecting his meals. And his wife, Laurie, had said, like, he does need to eat and he is hungry. He just can't often see his meals. And she told one nurse that, but that nurse didn't pass it on to the team, and they all believed that he was just rejecting the meals. And she was able to show them the film, and then they were able to pass that around the whole team, and then they all understood exactly what he was experiencing, which was a really, like, warming, satisfying response to it.
It's amazing.
I'm aware we don't have too much time, so let's get, if there are any questions from the audience for anyone on the panel at all. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, we have a mic here, so...
So yes, a question for Simon. Just wondering, does working on something like that make you extremely more empathetic to that particular condition?
I mean, in the sense that I'd never really put myself in that position before. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was completely new to me, and obviously, like, you hear stories. You know, most people will have been affected or know somebody who's been affected by dementia. Yeah, I mean, if I'm honest, I still can't quite, like, picture what they see, like. Hence the title. It's very difficult, and I think the symptoms of each person that I interviewed, it can be kind of contradictory. Like, there's one bit where somebody says I can pick up a bird that's moving, and another person would say I can't see it. If it's still and it's small, I can kind of pick it up, but if it's kind of big, I can't, for whatever reason. Do I empathise with them more? I don't. Yeah, it's a difficult question. I would, given the answer, I don't know. I think it was really difficult I normally make abstract animations. And the last time I showed here was in the abstract program a few years ago. And one of the hardest things was feeling like I had some kind of responsibility to these people. Like when I initially heard about the idea, I thought, oh wow, I can make a documentary about something that's really abstract, and felt like I could just be really creative. But as soon as I started interviewing them, I realized that there was this like ethical question of to what extent are they my audience, if you see what I mean, and to what extent do I have a responsibility to tell their story in an accessible way that helps their cause. And that was quite difficult, for me that was really challenging, because normally I sort of, make abstract things where nobody's telling me what to do and I can go in any direction I want. That was an interesting constraint.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Yes, this is for Chris. Considering over half this country voted to leave the EU, how did you manage to find leavers that conform to your prejudices so easily?
That's a good one, yeah. Well, I suppose that's a bit of the director's purgatory, really, isn't it? It's I sort of done. I suppose at the time I felt quite angry about stuff, and I think the loads of right-wing people put all their stuff out there, and I put mine out. And if people don't like it, then that's whatever. I mean, obviously. That's cool, because everybody's got a right to say whatever they want, haven't they? So, but yeah, no, it was interesting making a film, because I did in the original script I had lots of Remainers in there as well, and actually sort of ripped the shit out of Remainers, and editorially in France they didn't want me to. They wanted me to keep it to have the Brexiteers. Because originally, that's how I felt about it. So upon reflection, I was glad, in a way, that with that edit, it has all the Brexiteers in. I know it won't please everybody, but I suppose I know I'm never going to please everybody, because over half the country voted to leave. So I'm never really going to please them. So, so I'm sorry for those people. But anyway, I've done it now. So I don't.
Some more questions. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I can if you like.
Oh, sorry. I thought you put your hand up.
Sorry, it's Simon again. The responsibility, the moral, ethical thing. I'm drawn by that, I must say, and I don't know what it's like.
I don't really have a proper answer.
No. But the fact that it helped the nurses understand what this patient was feeling. I know you don't necessarily want to feel that moral responsibility, but is there an organisation like the Alzheimer's Society, perhaps, who might be able to launch that film or use that film in a clinical context, so it is helpful?
I wasn't saying it, that was more my experience of making it in terms of me wanting to do what I want to do in a sort of, I wouldn't call it self-indulgent, but it's sort of wanting to go in my own direction, and all of a sudden, I guess I wasn't expecting that dilemma in my head. I didn't really. I know I've worked in doing animation for documentaries before, a friend of mine runs a documentary film festival, so I'm sort of like quite familiar with a lot of the objectivity debates. And I think normally people say with animation, and I think it's absolutely true, that you can go in a direction like it's immediately subjective. So it was I was almost surprised by, hold on a sec, I can't just take quotes from these people and then create an animation that tells some kind of psychedelic story about, isn't it weird what the brain does? There was some kind of, there was a lot of sadness in the conversations that, like, most of them are really, like, brave and positive. But there was also moments where I was like, I have to communicate. And I didn't really want to tell a sort of sad story. I wanted it to be, I wanted an element of the fantastical in there, but I didn't feel like I could totally remove myself from that. And I think maybe that's the dilemma that I'm alluding to, if that makes sense. I think it's kind of an infinite debate in a way, but it was the first time I'd experienced that, I think. Yeah, and it's been shared quite widely in I mean, I don't know how widely, because there's not really necessarily a record of it, but there's a team of people at the UCL Dementia Research Centre where the scientist Sebastian Crutch that I know is, and he's working with lots of people, and it was part funded by the Created Out of Mind residency at the Wellcome Trust. So that's sort of like lots of artists and researchers. But, you know, if you have any way of making it more famous, then I'm all for it.
Do you have any other questions for anyone on the panel?
I've got an idea, and it's kind of forming in my head, so bear with. It's opening up from this idea of the view from the 90s that you couldn't have documentaries that weren't live action, which was, some people would say, well, that's the only reality that there is. So I want to ask you what you think about the idea that that's stepping back from the real. How does that make things more real and more accessible? If that makes sense.
Sorry. Stepping back from the real makes it more accessible, is that right?
Makes it more real, like, so not having actual physical people, what most people would see as reality. There's something in what you're doing and what all the documentaries, I think, touched on, that there was a deeper connection somewhere, because we're not just relying on a physical image that, in a way, it's presented.
I mean, journalists are different from documentary filmmakers in that we have a sort of editorial role, we have opinions, we have an angle, an argument. So maybe that's one side of it. It's an extension of that sort of editorial role, and it's venturing into the aesthetics. We make our argument in whatever means we can. And then this idea of a sort of index link between what's in front of the camera and what's going to be presented to the viewer. I mean, I think that's become less and less essential in documentary as people are realizing how good a tools and how varied tools there could be for communication. You know, this, and I think also this sort of idea of this sort of fly on the wall sort of observational documentary maker. You know, we all know that there's a team of people in that room. That each one of these tactics for making an authentic sort of live action documentary all have their fallacies and all have their sort of maskery involved. So I think there just seems to be a sort of progression towards opening, you know, opening your mind about what a documentary can be. The only concern I have is that, you know, fake news might have an impact on, you know, whether or not these films are taken that seriously if we don't really know what truth is anywhere. Maybe there's going to be some quite conservative documentaries coming out in response to that. But otherwise it seems to be getting broader and broader.
Anyone want to add anything to what Alex said? No? Okay. Probably got time for 2 more questions. Anyone else got anything right at the back there?
I have a question at Alex. At the end of your film, you kind of pointed out the fact that your dad was not completely happy with you being just busy. So my question is, how did he react to the film, and how does he understand your role?
Well, that was a sort of, I mean, what the film doesn't make very clear is that I have 2 other siblings as well as Jamie. And one of them didn't want to be in the film, and the other one said nothing but sort of sweet things about my brother, and there was no sort of narrative arc in her story about him. So I cut her. Yeah, I'm going to go to Sweden for Christmas. Yeah, but my dad, he loves the film. He's very pleased with this sort of, it's almost this like enormous family portrait I had commissioned. You know, it's so wonderfully rich. What I'm, you know, sitting down with your family members and really having an interview and talking about all this, you know, how difficult it was giving birth to my brother, and, you know, the idea that he had these sort of horrific sort of flashes. I mean, they also found out that he had Down syndrome when he was born, not anywhere through the pregnancy. It was a long time ago. And so you know, it was important for us to have this sort of like shared record, a sort of official history of my brother, which is maybe a lot of responsibility, but I think they're pleased with how it came out. I screened an early animatic at his birthday, his 40th birthday, and lots of family friends, and they all were very positive, and basically they like it. So I'm lucky that it went well.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question? Yep, somebody down here.
Just a technical question for Marcus about yours was a drawn animation, and I'm just intrigued to hear something of the process of how you made that. It was used some oil crayons, I think, and how many frames did you have to do per second in order to create those flowing images?
Well, it changes depending on how much time I've got left. But yeah, I mean, the process of that technically was, I mean, went out and recorded sound first, and then brought it all back and edited it together into some form of rhythm, and then I do a lot of drawing, and I did, you know, I took sketches while I was out, and then just start using oil pastels and watercolors and inks and anything that, I mean, for the start, I wanted to go from something that was very basic at the beginning that grew into something that was full color and quite intense, and then at the end it fades back out again to being just very simple. And so yeah, using oil pastel, I like to use oil pastels quite a lot when I'm making films, because I can just get colors down really quickly, and yeah, there's no kind of fuss, and everything's all on one piece of paper. There's no layers and things like that, and you just end up with a big pile, thousands of just drawings, bits of paper piled up somewhere, which go into my mum and dad's loft and stay there for a while, unless anybody wants to buy any. And that's about it. But yes, I kind of, for this one as well, it was very quick, so trying to keep it as simple as possible. And yeah, and it's, you know, it's, I guess my work ends up in documentary screenings quite a lot, even though I don't really think of it as a documentary. I see it as just me observing what I see and what I think about a place, or, you know, and it's, for me, it's kind of being impressionistic, I guess, and getting my idea across of somewhere, but, you know, from taken from the real, it ends up in documentary surroundings. So yeah, it's interesting. That's how I do it.
How big are the drawings?
They start off about this big, and then by the end they're that big, and then they get that big, and yeah, you all of a sudden see little tiny things, or where your scanner was messy when I was scanning them in, and there's just bits of rubbish all over the place, which is always a fun part of it as well.
Cool. Okay, we have to end it there, but thank you very much to all the members of the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you. And please remember to grab a form on your way out and vote for the favourite film you've seen in the screening as well. Thanks for coming.